All right, Kira, would you like to get started?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So my name is Kira Zidan. I am the Education and Public Outreach Coordinator at the ASBMB. The ASBMB is a nonprofit scientific and educational organization with over 12,000 members worldwide. It was founded in 1906 and is based in Rockville, Maryland, and publishes the Journal of Biological Chemistry, Molecular and Cellular Proteomics, and the Journal of Lipid Research. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Tips for Applying for ASBMB Accreditation, hosted by the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee. This webinar focuses on the hallmarks of an ASBMB accredited program, the general guidelines and requirements of the accreditation process, and the benefits of accreditation for students, programs, and educators, with an emphasis on the certification exam. If you have problems connecting to the webinar audio through your computer, you can connect via phone at the number in the chat box. If you connect via phone, you must mute your phone through the entirety of the webinar. All phone users can be heard within the webinar suite, and we will have extreme difficulty delivering the webinar to all participants if we have background noise. Before we get started with introductions, I'd like to direct you to a few features in the webinar room. First, there is a poll at the top right of the screen. The poll will give us a little information about your stage in applying for ASBMB accreditation, which will help us cover topics that are most important to you in our discussion. Second, throughout the presentation today, we will be accepting questions and sharing resources. You can submit a question through the Q&A box at the bottom right of your screen. In the interest of time, we will hold questions until the conclusion of the presentation. At this time, the speaker will answer previously submitted questions as well as new questions that may arise. With all that, let's get started. I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Adele Wolfson, Professor Emerita of Biochemistry at Wellesley College and Chair of the Program Evaluation Subcommittee. Adele, would you like to provide a welcome on behalf of the ASBMB?
Sure, thanks, Kira. So good afternoon, everyone. As Kira said, my name is Adele Wolfson. I am at Wellesley College, and I chair the subcommittee which evaluates program applications. I want to add my welcome to you and thank you for your interest in ASBMB accreditation. I will be presenting on the application process and program evaluation, and I hope that we'll be able to answer all your questions.
Thanks, Adele. Next, I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Peter Kennelly, Professor of Biochemistry at Virginia Tech. He is a member of the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee and the chair of the Accreditation Steering Group. Pete?
And I would like to join Adele and Kira in welcoming you. I hope that we can address all the issues you have on your mind. And I'd also like to encourage you in the future, use your email, reach out to us with questions. We'll try and connect you with people who can help you out. So even if we don't get to what you need in the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us in the future.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Pete. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Adele and Pete.
I would be very happy to do that, except that I don't have a slide in front of me at the moment. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so when we decided to establish an accreditation program, a process for undergraduate programs, we had the goals in mind that you see on this slide. For each of the groups that are listed, the students, educators, programs, and also ASBMB, we wanted to provide external evaluation and a credential that would be useful for local as well as the national environment. We wanted our values as educators to be central, which meant that every stage of the process would have to be run by members of the BMB education community. The program right now is up and running. For a relatively new process, we've been quite successful. As you can see, we only started in 2013, but already we have accredited programs across the country in a wide variety of institutions. You'll see a little bit of data later on the types of institutions, and the number of students taking the exam has grown every year. You can also see here that there is a link for information, guidelines, sample applications, and example exam questions. So why should you get your program accredited? As you know, if you want your students to get their degrees certified, which is an important credential, your program must first be accredited. So that's the first step. But in addition to that requirement, we think the program accreditation provides a number of benefits to you and to your institution. Like any kind of self-assessment, it's an opportunity for you to evaluate your major, including all the elements that we will talk about. And our guidelines and rubrics provide a standard that you can use for that kind of self-evaluation. Also, like any external review, it gives you ammunition to go to your administration in requesting resources such as faculty lines or instrumentation with a strong argument that these are required by your professional organization. And it also helps to establish or document quality for a whole range of audiences, prospective students for you, and outplacement for your students or graduates in terms of internships, summer programs, the workplace, and graduate school. You can see on this slide some feedback from programs that have been accredited. We believe that we have in fact provided a benefit for these accredited institutions. These quotes give you some sense of why they applied and how they're using the credential. And as you can see from their feedback, which I'll give you time to read, and this also was in ASBMB today, accreditation provides structure for design or redesign of programs, for leveraging resources, and many other positive outcomes. So what do we look for in an application? We have three broad areas that we examine: the curriculum, the faculty, and the infrastructure of the institution. And I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. In every case, when I say we expect something, we want to see specific evidence of its existence. And please note that we know very well that programs applying to us are at a wide range of institutions, from small to large, from PUIs to R1s, from those programs housed in chemistry departments to those housed in biology departments to those in standalone BMB programs. And we do not imagine that there's a single ideal model of a program for accreditation. So there's not one size fits all for sure. In terms of accreditation, in terms of curriculum, we don't have a set of courses that we look to check off, but we do consider whether or not the core concepts in biochemistry and molecular biology are introduced and then developed throughout a sequence of courses. So we look at the four key concepts, which Pete will talk a little bit more about in terms of the exam. We want to see that those are both covered at the introductory level and again at the intermediate and advanced levels. That usually means that students need to take multiple courses in both biology and chemistry, as well as advanced biochemistry courses. We've also laid out the minimum number of hours of experiential learning, essentially lab courses, as being a minimum of 400. And we also expect your curriculum to address the skills that we've named here in concrete ways. So in other words, communication, teamwork, safety, and ethics. For faculty, we've stated that we expect at least 3 faculty members to be affiliated with the program, and that the faculty should represent the range of expertise needed in BMB. And we often get a lot of questions about that number 3. It's not that you need to have 3 people who call themselves biochemists, but you have to have 3 people who are affiliated with the program and are central to that program, and have enough expertise to either teach or mentor students in research in BMB. We expect that the institution is going to provide opportunities for professional development, such as sabbaticals, funding for travel to professional meetings, events, or programming to improve and update teaching methods. Thinking about the infrastructure side, we want to see data on the capacity of the classrooms and labs for teaching and research, as well as other facilities. We don't want an exhaustive list of all of your equipment as you would put on a grant application. Just follow the guidelines to let us know that the teaching labs are sufficiently equipped and whether or not there are other more advanced pieces of equipment available. The commitments to diversity and advising should be more than just lip service, so we really want to hear about those programs. Notice that this year we are adding 2 questions on Title IX and adherence to rules on sexual harassment. This is so far going to be just for information and not factored into the assessment, but we think it's an important point that we want to hear from everyone about. This year, we have a single deadline. This is the first year that we're putting this into effect. So October 1st is now the only deadline for the year. It seems that most programs prepare their applications over the summer, so this made a lot of sense to have the deadline in the fall. And it also allows us to evaluate applications in time to have your students take the exam in the spring. We received a lot of feedback from programs about the application itself. We did a survey. We've also held open meetings at the annual meeting, and we've also gotten personal emails back again. The feedback that we got, along with the discussions among the members of the evaluation committee, led to a substantial redesign of the forms and the guidelines and what's posted to the website. So if you applied 7 years ago, or if you put it off because you thought that it was so onerous, I hope that you'll look again and see that it's still a serious commitment of time and effort, but we hope that it's now much more straightforward and less confusing than it might have been in the past. And now that we have the assessment rubrics posted, you can see what we're looking for in each category. And again, as Pete mentioned, you're always welcome to email Kira or myself if you have questions about the process. We have a committee of representatives from a broad range of institutions that evaluates and discusses the applications. You can see here that we use a rubric and we cover those 13 critical categories, 8 desirable categories, and 4 categories that are for feedback only. And again, if you look at the rubrics, you'll have some sense of what's requested or required in each of those. I'll add that we are always happy to get new members. If you're interested in this, and especially once your program has been accredited, we'd really like to hear from you. We always want to see a broad range of representation on that committee. The possible decisions are that you can be fully accredited for 7 years. You can be provisionally accredited. That happens either if it's a new program. So new programs, until you've graduated at least 5 classes, you can only get provisional accreditation. You can also be given provisional accreditation if there are some deficiencies in the application. It can also be denied, but that's quite rare. The only cases that we've seen are programs that were truly not BMB programs, but we do have the option of denial if there are really major deficiencies. And we will sometimes defer an application if we don't have enough information on the application itself. If you either are denied or provisionally approved and you think that's not appropriate, there is a process to appeal those decisions. So here are some questions that frequently come up. We're going to go over some of this as well, but we'll look at more questions later. It doesn't cost anything to apply for ASBMB accreditation, although students are charged for the exam, or your institution can pay that charge. I've already mentioned that newly established programs are eligible. They can be given provisional accreditation until the 5th year. But the important thing is if you get provisional accreditation, your students can still take the exam. So that's important, so that even if you've got a new program, you may want to apply, even knowing that you're only going to be able to get provisional accreditation. Provisional accreditation is given twice, so you can get those 3 years and then a 4th year and then be on the 7-year cycle. If you have multiple tracks within your institution, both of them can apply. For example, if you have a molecular biology track within biology and a biochemistry track within chemistry, both of those tracks are eligible to apply, but we want to see separate applications because it gets really confusing to figure out what's going on. And as we mentioned earlier, there is an appeal process for denial of applications. So again, if you have any questions on any of this, please use the chat box or contact us via the email address that you have here. And I'm going to turn it over to Pete until the end of his talk, at which point I'll be happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Adele. One of the early decisions in terms of the accreditation process was that we wanted to provide a chance for students to earn a credential that was performance-based, rather than just I happen to matriculate through a school that happened to have this accredited status. And that led us to the development of a certification exam. And the goal of this exam is to provide an evidence-based evaluation that uses community-generated criteria. And there have been lengthy discussions with the community helping us to define what distinguishes biochemistry and molecular biology and defines it and differentiates it from other things. It reflects our desire, as I say, to recognize students, and it provides assessment data generated using a national independently developed and scored instrument. And at least in the case of Virginia Tech, we are required now to have external program evaluation of this kind, and so the ASBMB exam is a made-to-order package that we've been able to take advantage of. And in designing the exam, we've tried to emphasize the core concepts and critical thinking skills that the community has defined as being important. Oop, I need to start advancing slides. My bad. So the basic attributes, currently the exam is administered in the spring, in this past March. It's designed to fit in a single class session, so it's an hour in length. We have surveyed programs in the past to ask whether they thought that that was an appropriate amount of time or whether they wanted a longer, both in time and in number of questions, exam, and the consensus has been that an hour is the optimum. Currently, it's paper-based. It generally consists of a dozen questions that are balanced in terms of both formats and in terms of coverage. So the exam emphasizes free response questions, but also includes a smattering of multiple select questions and an occasional multiple choice question. The four core concept areas that we cover are information storage and transfer, macromolecular structure and function, energy and metabolism, and the scientific method and quantitative analysis. Like all of accreditation, this exam is a living, breathing product of the community, of educators. It's not handed down from some corporate entity, some testing service. The exam is constructed, it's vetted, it's piloted, it's scored by faculty volunteers drawn from colleges and universities across North America. Currently, more than 50 people are participating, and we're always looking for more. For those of you who are curious, want to know more about accreditation, want to know more about the exam, who want to have your views help shape this process, getting involved as a question writer, as a scorer, as someone reviewing applications gives you an opportunity to do that. And the people who do so are recognized for their efforts by receiving a certificate designating them an ASBMB Educational Fellow. Obviously, since we have a high content of free response questions, we need to have a lot of human beings involved in the scoring. We use 2 for the multiple choice questions, 3 for the free response and multiple select questions, working from a common key. The scorers work both to refine the question and to refine the key as a team before we even send out the exam. We grade responses on a 3-point scale, basically highly proficient answers, proficient answers, or not yet proficient answers. That is because our goal is not to assess fine gradations between, A plus A, A minus, B plus B. We are asking, do students reach a threshold in terms of breadth and depth of knowledge that is appropriate for someone with a BS degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. And so the key issue is whether or not they achieve proficiency rather than trying to discriminate between degrees of excellence. The questions are also structured to offer different levels of challenge cognitively across different Bloom levels. The makeup is generally 2 what we call high Bloom's levels questions to every 1 low Bloom's level question. We ask that students to pass, successfully achieve proficient or better on approximately 65% of the high Bloom's questions and 75% of the low Bloom's questions. Although if they do better on the high Bloom's questions, they can slip and do only 2 of the lower questions. The high proficiency category is what we use to differentiate those who display a solid performance from those who are truly exceptional, and they are recognized by receiving certification with distinction. Here are the results of the last several exams. You can see we're growing. This past year, nearly 1,000 students took the exam. Over 70 programs participated. You can see that the rate of success of achieving certification on the exam has varied over the last several years between 35 and 55%, with distinction between 10 and 18%. This is not meant to be a pushover. It is a credential that we believe reflects a substantive achievement. Is there a fee? And the answer is yes. We need to defray the costs. Even though our faculty volunteers do so as volunteers, there are many, many expenses involved, mailing, printing, staff involved in this, and so we charge a nominal amount. For the past 2 years, it's been $30 per student to help defray some of those costs. We ask that to help ease the logistics, that the institutions be the collector of funds from their students, either deciding to make a lump payment on behalf of their students that they pay for and have their students do it for free, or if they wish to have their students actually defray the cost, be the ones who collect the money and then send us a lump payment. We would like to make the system more flexible. We would like to eventually have this go online, but that is something that requires time, resources, and investment, and we're not there yet. One of the questions is, should you have juniors or seniors take it? If you're a program like mine, the capstone courses, the key courses for biochemistry take place in junior year, and so there may be an advantage to students to have them take it as juniors. More typically, students are in a better position to do it as seniors. We ask you to decide when your students, when your curriculum, when your academic calendar has your students optimally prepared. We are oftentimes asked, should you just limit your participation to outstanding students? And the answer is no, we do not recommend that. This assessment is meant to be a no-fault assessment. It is not used in any way, shape, or form to either determine accredited status, nor do we go and publicize that certain programs had scores that may have been higher or lower than others. This is a vehicle to help you reflect on and hopefully improve teaching and learning in your department, but you cannot do that if you have only your top students take the exam. So if you want the full benefit, the benefit we hope that you're trying to derive from it, we'd like the entire cohort. We recommend that the entire cohort take the exam. We get at how can we help prepare our students? Can we give you old exams? And the answer is no. Neither does the GRE or the ACS. There is a tremendous investment in developing test questions, and they have to be used multiple times. However, we have developed an extensive library of sample questions to help students see and instructors see both the format, what we consider appropriate answers. We also posted learning outcomes, talking about and relating them to the core principles we talked about. And as I said before, this is a community-owned, living, evolving process. And if you would like to be a part of that, we hope you would be interested in volunteering. Now, instead of frequently asked questions, we developed a list of kind of urban myths that have arisen about accreditation. One is that you hear from small schools that this is only for big schools with lots of resources, and no, that's not the case. And you hear from big schools that it's only for those schools that really focus only on undergraduate education and aren't comprehensive schools. Neither is the case. If you look at the distribution of institutions, we have schools with 1,500 students total accredited. We have schools with 60,000 students. We have state schools, private schools, all over the map. There's a fear that this is a very expensive program to participate in. For the value we receive, we think you get an awful lot. We've tried to keep things to a minimum. We do not charge for becoming accredited just for taking the exam. No, you do not have to have all your faculty be card-carrying ASBMB members to become accredited, although we would hope that if you value this program, you would value the society that's sponsoring it. As I said before, there is no penalty for how your students do or do not perform on the exam. Many of you add tremendous value to students who came in with backgrounds that weren't as strong as students at other schools, and we don't think that this exam reflects that value added, just where they are. And as Adele has said, we've worked very hard and collected feedback from you to try and make the accreditation application as efficient and streamlined as we possibly can. And with that, I will thank you all on behalf of Adele and Kira, Danielle, and myself for your attention. And we'll open things up to the audience.
Thank you so much, Pete and Adele, for your insights. And at this point, I'd like to open the discussion, and we're going to start with some questions from participants.
So, Kira, this is Adele. I saw a couple of questions come up already in the chat box, and maybe I can just respond to those while we're collecting some more.
Yes,
so one of the questions was whether or not a school that has a shared program between chemistry and biology, if that is two separate tracks. If it is a single program, that should be a single application. And that is a very, very common model. It's probably the one that we see most from small schools. It's only a single application, a single program. All the students do the same courses or have a set of electives that would accomplish the same outcomes. That would be a single application.
Okay.
So I hope that answers that question. The next question I saw was whether or not accreditation is limited to American schools, and the answer to that is yes. We've been asked from a number of other institutions from outside of the U.S., and we've made the decision that we simply do not know enough about the systems in other countries to be able to evaluate them. So we do not accredit even Canadian schools, which are probably the closest to the U.S. However, we're always happy to share materials with those outside the U.S. if they're interested in either setting up their own accreditation program or just using it as an informal kind of evaluation. Okay, and I'm going to leave the question about the exam to Pete because that is, or Kira, those are, that's a question that is probably more appropriate for them. But I will answer the question about the 400 hours. That is an absolute deal breaker. That is probably the only thing that we turn back to schools with an answer of, if you don't have 400 hours, then you don't have a program that we can accredit. It doesn't have to be in coursework. If everybody has to carry out research, a number of hours of that can count as well, or practicum, as long as it's all students who are finishing that number of hours.
And just to follow up on that, that's 400 hours in STEM. So that means organic chemistry, that means physics lab, it's micro, it's not just biochemistry. And if you do the math, it basically means for a typical 15-week semester that the students spent 3.5 hours in lab. So looking at it from the perspective of 4 years, it's not an onerous requirement.
Okay. And Pete, there's a follow-up to that question. Some of the required courses are from other departments. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, absolutely. It's all STEM courses.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions on the exam. One is it possible to administer the exam later in the year? For example, for school on quarter calendars where students might still be taking courses until early June. Pete, would you like to take that?
Our long-term goal is to get the exam on an online platform that would give us flexibility in scheduling the exam, but currently we just don't have the resources to do so. Our goal is to have 2020, 2021, the possibility of piloting with a limited number of schools, an online system, but that's something that's, although is very desirable, it's proving to be a formidable challenge to get implemented. But we are striving for that.
Great, and I'm looking at a question here. If your department already has an ACS accreditation, can we also have an ASBMB accreditation for our biochemistry majors? And the answer is yes, you can. Definitely you can apply and be accredited by the ASBMB. Pete, we have another question on the exam. How important is the content in calculus with analytic geometry 2 and physical chemistry for their requirements to apply for accreditation?
So this is an examination in biochemistry, molecular biology, and related areas. I think you'll see if you look at the sample questions and if you look at the core concepts and learning objectives that calculus, analytical geometry, PChem are not required to pass the exam, that there are not questions that are asking about those in explicit ways. There are
but I'll just, yeah, I was going to say, not as far as the exam, but as far as the accreditation process, there are certainly topics that are covered typically in a PChem course that are necessary. So we do not say, oh, you can't be accredited because you don't require PChem. But we do say, are you covering all of the topics as far as, for example, energy transduction and structure and function? Are you covering those at both the introductory and the advanced level? And in many schools, the advanced level comes in the PChem course. So that's where it would come in. Not that we're looking for specific courses, but that there's too much content sometimes to fit into other courses.
Great. We have another question for you, Adele, and Pete. You can also chime in. How does the accreditation look for and value research? For example, if a school doesn't do very much research but does include cures in their lab, especially biochemistry and mol bio, how is that viewed now?
So those are two separate things really to think about. So we do look for opportunities for undergraduate research. One of the myths actually that we didn't put up there but I've heard over the years is that we expect every student to be able to do research. And that is not the case because we know that at large schools there may not be the capacity and at small schools there may not be the expertise. So We know that not every student is going to be able to do research, but we do look for opportunities for research, and we do look for some data on how many of your students are doing research. So that's where the research piece of it comes in. The cures are coming in more in the direction of looking for student-centered or active learning. And so that's one of the questions that we ask is what types of active learning take place within your department or program. And that's probably where cures would be entered. On the other hand, if the cures lead to publications, then they could be discussed within the context of research as well.
All right, thanks so much, Adele. We have a few previously submitted questions that I'll go ahead and read now. One of them is, what are some examples of professional development programs for faculty? Adele.
Well, we would want to see for sure whether or not your institution offers sabbaticals, whether they're funded at what level. We would also be interested in whether or not you have a learning and teaching center, for example, that offers programs on methods of teaching, methods of assessment, active learning more generally. So those types of things. If faculty are able to attend meetings, both for their research or scholarly activities and for their pedagogical activities.
Thanks, Adele. And Pete, can a student take the certification exam after they've graduated or as a refresher?
So you only get one bite of the apple. Most students are taking the exam as seniors, and so they only have one opportunity, and so that means, to be fair to all students, that no student gets to take it second time, nor do we have the ability to support rehearsal exams. We provide what we think are reasonable materials in the sample question section to help students prepare. As far as having students take the exam afterwards, they're going to have their institution broker that. Students who are not matriculating through accredited programs are not allowed to take the exam, and so they're going to have to approach us through their home program to do so. And that's going to be a question of whether the home program feels comfortable with doing that.
Thanks, Pete. And this next one is also for you. Can you speak more about the benefits to students for passing the exam, especially for students from PUIs?
So basically, a student who is certified by ASBMB has achieved to a level comparable to their peers at institutions from across the United States, from 70 institutions across the U.S., free of institutional cachet or reputation. And we think that's, extremely important. I personally am a graduate. My college was the Illinois Institute of Technology. It wasn't Stanford or Harvard. So obviously the opportunity to have something to say, I'm as good as somebody from those schools. I passed the same exam, I think is extremely valuable for students, and I think is one of the major benefits that you can provide your students, one of the major reasons for taking the effort to become an accredited program.
Thanks, Pete. Adele, provisional accreditation is for programs with less than 5 classes, but is there a minimum number of students graduating per year in those first years?
There's no minimum number for any year, actually, but what we do have a question on the rubric that asks how many students are graduating each year, and if it looks like the number is quite small or decreasing, then we flag it, not because we want to say you can't have a small program, but because we worry about sustainability. So if we think that the institution might decide to fold the program, for example, if there aren't enough students, or if the classes are so small that the college might decide that they can't offer them anymore, we won't turn down a program for those reasons, but we will mention it in the letter that we send as a kind of feedback that you need to think about this. Is your program sustainable?
Thanks, Adele. I have another question that was previously submitted. Do you pre-screen programs for eligibility? And I can answer that one. We don't. We ask applicants to please look at the guidelines, the rubric, and the application form and decide for yourself if your program meets eligibility requirements. We have another question. Are there any course requirements for accreditation? We've talked a little bit about this, but Adele, do you want to speak a little bit more about course requirements, electives, required courses, etc.?
Right. So as we've said, we do not have a list of required courses. So we will never come back to you and say we can't accredit you because you're not offering XYZ course. But we do have a grid that you'll see if you look at the application that asks about each of the core concepts with sub-areas within each of those core concepts and whether or not those are covered at the introductory and the advanced level. And that will allow you, I think, to see what courses you need because they're covered typically in the same kinds of courses. So even though we don't require specific courses, many programs look very similar in terms of their introductory courses and intermediate courses in chemistry and biology, and then the advanced ones in biochemistry and molecular biology with some auxiliary courses in physics and math, et cetera. So even though we say that we don't require specific courses, the outline of the courses that most places offer wind up looking quite similar, although it varies a lot from small school to big school, whether you're offering a BA or a BS. As far as electives, we do not, well, electives have to, the electives that each student in your program elects have to provide the same coverage. So if students can take any course in chemistry or any course in biology as their upper level course, then we might worry that there are some students who are not getting, for example, the genetics content or the advanced physical concepts. And so you would need to demonstrate that every student has to choose from a set of electives that will still offer that same set of core concept coverage.
And if I could add something, it would be easier for us to just check off and see if you have the names of certain courses. The reason that we have approached this from how do you get across, how do you deal with a set of concepts and skills is to allow you as educators to be innovative, flexible, creative in moving pedagogy forward instead of having us lock you in to some set of courses because it happens to be more convenient for us to score.
Thank you so much, Adele and Pete. We have another question. For the accreditation application, who can be considered B&B faculty? Depending on the criteria, that could be a big or small number.
Well, we try to bracket that big and small number because we want at least 3, and we ask you not to list more than 10 on the application. So even if you're an enormous school that has many more than 10, we really only want to see 10 listed on the forms and with CVs included in the application. I would say that it's the ones that you're listing are the people who are core to your program. So they're teaching the courses that are considered the biochemistry courses, so not the ones, unless the person in physics is doing some biophysics research and taking biochem students into their lab, I would not generally include that person. I would not include every person who teaches organic chemistry unless those people are also doing research which is related to BMB. It's really the people who are central to the program. And as I say, that's typically between 3 and 10 that we're going to see on the application. And it should be people who are not just peripherally involved, but people who are really part of whatever you call your program, whether it is a track within a department or a joint program or a standalone program.
Thank you, Adele. And Pete, at a university that's already accredited by ACS, what are the differences between the ACS and the ASBMB certification exams? The students already complete the organic standardized ACS test, for example. So what would be the difference with the ASBMB exam?
So there are two major differences. The ACS exam is an exclusively multiple choice exam, whereas the ASBMB exam is 60% or so free response, and the rest multiple select and some multiple choice. We believe that this variety of formats facilitates us asking questions that deal with skills and concepts over a broad range of topics and levels. The other factor is that if you look at the ASBMB exam, a quarter of the content will be devoted to energy and those principles, a quarter of the content to macromolecular structure and function, a quarter of the content to information storage and transfer, a quarter of the content to scientific method and quantitative reasoning. If you look at the ACS exam from past years, 80% of the content, 80% of the questions will pertain to those first two areas I quoted. So in terms of the distribution of topics, there is a lot of overlap, but we tend to emphasize molecular biology and quantitative reasoning more heavily in our exam than the ACS does.
Thank you so much, Pete. Adele, how long does program evaluation take after submitting an application?
We have committed to getting back to schools within 6 months. So our current schedule calls for the applications being submitted in October and a decision being made by January. So that's pretty typical.
Thanks. And does the review process include site visits?
It does not. We do not have the personnel to do that, and in fact, we don't see the necessity. Program site visits are great things, but they are way beyond the level of what we're asking for here.
Okay, thank you. And Pete, it looks like questions from this sample exam are appropriate for separate biochemistry and molecular biology courses. Is it common or appropriate to split the exam between two classes?
I'm not sure what's meant by splitting between two classes.
I am guessing that they would like to register their biochemistry and their molecular biology students separately.
And that is appropriate as long as both are matriculating through an accredited degree program. So whether an application, I think Adele can speak to this, I think her committee would prefer to look at if there's a separate biochemistry track and a distinct molecular biology track, to look at those as separate entities than as a kind of global mishmash kind of application. Would you like to speak to that, Adele?
Yeah, I think we said that already, that if you have two different tracks, we want two different applications.
Great.
In which case, the students two separate groups of students could be taking the exam at two different times, I guess.
Good. Okay, so we have a question. Is the 2018 accreditation guideline referenced in the link the one we should use for reaccreditation for the upcoming 2019 deadline? Yes, it is. We have changed the application form and we'll post it on the website soon, and also you can email us and we'll provide you with the link, and it's also here on the Q&A box. And we will email you also the updated rubric that goes with the guidelines and applications form.
But it's not going to be very different. If you're using the 2018, there's going to be very, very minor tweaks to the 2019.
Yes, exactly. All right, we have a question on lab hours. Can the 400 lab hours include in silico labs? And I can answer that question, yes, it can. And as long as it's, as Pete suggested before, STEM-related labs. Pete, if you would like to take this one, how can we formally denote accreditation and or certification on diplomas?
I mean, that's something to negotiate with your registrar's office. There are universities that are posting this on student transcripts and the like. We are certainly open. We would like this certification to be recognized and publicized to the greatest degree possible. So we would welcome efforts to recognize your students during graduation and the like who've surmounted this hurdle.
Thank you, Pete. And I would also like to add that once you get accredited, we provide you with an official logo of ASBMB accredited institution that you can post on your website, and you can also use on social media, newsletters, etc. So, Adele, Pete, do you have any final words that you would like to share with the group?
Well, I would just say that I think that accreditation is a really important tool for institutions, and I assume that everybody has been through some kind of self-assessment for an external review at your institution. You know that the preparing for that external review is actually the most useful part of the whole process. It's not so much when the visitors come in, but it's when you sit down with your colleagues and think about what your program looks like. And ASBMB, the process of applying actually gets you one step closer to that. So it requires that you talk to one another, that you look at what you're offering to your students, and it's just a really good opportunity with a set of external and nationally recognized standards to be able to do that.
Well, I guess the thing I'd like to emphasize is this is something that came from the community and is being shaped and guided and administered by the community. It's something that is, as I say, it's not a corporate thing. It's something that your peers have invested time and effort in making happen, and we would welcome you getting involved in that and helping put your stamp on it as well. It's something that continues to evolve as we keep doing this. We get better at writing questions and scoring questions, at structuring the application process, and we hope to continue to do so, including offering, hopefully one day, the kind of scheduling flexibility through online that will help deal with some of the issues that you guys raised earlier.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank Adele and Pete for their time, as well as Danielle Snowflake, Director of Education and Professional Development and Outreach, who helped us put together this webinar. I would also like to thank all of you for joining us today. The ASBMB Education Department is hosting a workshop on transforming education in the molecular life sciences, July 25th through 28th. Be sure to visit our website for more details. We hope you will take the time to fill out a short survey about this webinar. This survey will be available upon meeting exit. Thank you so much and have a nice day.